and welcome again to another session of George Walker's music variety show, including guitar lessons. Today I'll be introducing some new songs that I've written. These songs were inspired by some of the other guitar player writers. Carlos Jobin, who was a Brazilian, the late great Brazilian composer, and one of the songs that most people will know him for is Ipanema. And on the other hand, we have Kenny Burrell. Kenny Burrell had a song called Blue Bossa, and I was inspired to write my own song, which is a Brazilian samba. And before the samba was popular, it was called the bossa nova. But right now, the samba is the most popular rhythm coming from Brazil. And this is one that I've made up, and that I was inspired by both of these writers, Carlos Jobin and Kenny Burrell. The name of my song is called A Cloudy Sunset. It's a song that's in E flat, but it starts out in C minor, which is the relative key. Just to give you a little idea of how these chord changes go before you actually hear the trio doing the whole song, here's some of the highlights of the song, the beginning. Well, it changes and goes into your major key from there. But that's some of the highlights of what you can expect, and the song that I'll be playing that'll give it that nice Brazilian samba feeling and melodies and chord changes. So now that you've heard the full rendition of what I was talking about earlier, I'll break it down a little further. Brazilian sambas have a certain type of rhythm And Brazilians, they have a certain type of chord progression and inversions of chord progressions. And what I wanted to do is make this song sound like a cloudy sunset day. It goes through moods of, let's say, darkness and then light. So I've used these different chord changes to brighten it up in places by going to the major and then back to the gloomy minor, so to speak. And some of these chord changes are designed to keep it interesting. It goes around a nice little cycle, but when you really analyze the cycle of chords I'm going through, it's basically C minor, F minor, and G7 using alternate chords, and then going to the major 7, E flat major using F minor to B flat, which means you have a 1 major and a series of 2 minor 5/7. And basically taking you around in a circle just to get back to the 2 minor 5/7, leading you back to C minor, which means a D minor to a G7 back to C minor. So all those chord changes are just revolving around these 2 minor 5/7, leading you from the major to the minor. So that's one way of making a song more interesting with chord changes, finding various ways to play the 2 minor and altered chords at the same time. So you hear different altered chords, but it's basically summed up to a 2 minor 5/7 to a minor key to a major key. Okay, as I was saying earlier, these chord changes are basically built around C minor, F minor, and your G, the 5th. And when you get beyond a 7th, you're altering. So the first chord change is a C minor 9th. So you have, and then you have F minor 7th. And then just before I go to the G7th, or the G7 plus the 5th, I use a 13th. Then I go to my 7th, to my C minor 9th again. And that's the basic pattern, the A part of the song. Then the B part of the song, I'm going to go into major. And then here goes a series of 2 minor 5/7, F minor to B flat 13th to E flat. So then that was a 2 minor 5/7 leading to E flat. So we're back into the major key, even though we started out with a relative minor. And then a group of progressions. We have a C7 flat 9th, then the 2 minor 5/7 again, F minor to B flat to E flat. Then we want to make a progression here so we can come back and make it longer. We're just making this a more serious roundabout way to get back to the key that we started out, which was C minor. So we're going to go the roundabout way here. And what I do is introduce a series of chord changes. These are all based on the 5/7 of C minor. So we get these alternate chords, like a minor 7, flat 5, a plus the 5th, a G7, raise 9th, and a G7 flat at 9th. Then we just go to a sus, a G7 sus chord, And then we're going to take it to a seventh. That's in E flat sus to an E flat seventh, but using a 13th. And now to take it right back to where we want to go, to the C minor, in the key of C minor, we go to a G7, which is a 5/7 of C minor. So we use the G sus to a G7. And then we're right back to C minor again. So that's what I call making it interesting to get back to wherever you want to go, using a series of 2 minor 5/7s. As I was saying earlier, I was inspired by the writers Carlos Jobin and the other friend of mine, actually, Kenny Burrell, which I had the pleasure of recording with him in Hollywood. Now, Kenny Burrell wrote a song called Blue Bossa, which was based on C minor. And the combination of these two songs, you just take the E flat scale and C minor scale, and I chose the E flat scale because it covers all the notes in these two different, 3 or 4, whatever amount of chord changes that I'm using. It's like I said, it's only 3 chord changes. It's C minor, F minor, and G7, but using alternate chords. So my solo is just based off of the notes out of E flat, but starting on the 6th would give you the minor: C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. So if you take those notes, that's really coming from the C. It's coming from the E flat major scale. So you find whatever notes you like out of that scale and make sure that you're developing a new song. Basically, you're soloing, but you're actually playing a new song over the chord changes. And some of the notes you want to choose are the notes that are the most effective, like G, B flat, C, and D. And then going to F minor, and that A flat to a G, so that's all I'm choosing from. And with that I can make up melodies, whether I play them single notes or octaves. So there's an idea. Just kind of connecting scale positions wherever you want, going up or down the fingerboard. But basically, it's coming from the E flat major scale. I'd like to let our listeners know that we enjoy your questions, and we have someone who took the time to let us know that they have a question about improvising. This question is from Jeff Shudak, and his question is, for a specific chord progression, how do you go about improvising a solo over it? Obviously, what sounds good is the most important thing, but there are things that you want to keep in mind when creating a solo to build the release, tension, and make it sound melodic. Well, actually, when you're soloing, you're actually making a new melody, and you want to build build up to a certain amount of tension and then release. So we call this tension and release. So in your playing, when you get to a certain point, you don't even have to think about tension and release because it happens automatically. You want to build around whatever you're utilizing. It could be through a group of notes. It's also the rhythm of the notes. And it's how you bring those notes to a conclusion. So you're making tension and then you release through a conclusion, just like you would make a statement in a sentence. Let's take a let's give a sample about that very thing I just talked about. Tension and release. For instance, the chord progression can be going from C minor to F minor to G7, back to C minor. So when we start out, we're going to start to build. There you go. Where was it going? It was building to the point where, okay, like you would boil water, but do you boil water until all the water boils back out of the pot? You want to release it before it gets to that point. It's boiled up to the point where it's no longer necessary to keep building. It's like I said, a pot of water. If you wanted to make yourself some hot chocolate and you wanted to get that water ready to make sure that it dissolves into that water to make you a nice drink, would you just keep boiling that water until it just boiled out and then you wouldn't have any water left? No. Well, your solo, you do that automatically once you understand the components and how the components go together. So you establish rhythm in a series of notes that are climbing up to this climax that you get to the certain point where you express yourself. Now you can release and start over onto something fresh and new. So that's my explanation of tension and release. So let's go on with the rest of the question. Melodic, making it a melody. In other words, sometimes people start out and the suggestion is take a scale that matches the chord. Some people take the scale and do not realize you just don't keep playing the notes out of the scale. You have to take the scale and make a nice melody or rewrite a song right over those chord changes. And what you want to do is make sure that whatever you write fits with the melody of the song that you created. Because in some cases, some people will take a solo and it doesn't match the song. It doesn't develop with what your statement originally was in the song. So I think about some scales that fit and some notes that'll fit, but you have to come up and rewrite a melody that fits the whole song, and that's what's really important. So when going from one chord to the next and improvising, there are certain notes in whatever you choose as far as the scale goes that can connect in a strong way, that really tie into the chord. So there's certain notes that you might want to choose to make sure they tie into the chord. For instance, C minor, E flat is the third. That ties into the chord real well. Then when I go to F minor, I can still use the E flat for F minor. I can still use E flat for G7 and release it down to D and end on C. So what they say is that if you're good, you can take 3 notes and make a solo. That means you take 3 notes and you put the right rhythm into it, and you go from place to place with those 3 notes in such a way you make it sound melodic, rhythmic, and tasteful. That's what you have to keep in mind when you're taking your solo. You want to be melodic, rhythmic, and tasteful, and build on tension and release. And the more you do it, the less you think about it. And I think hopefully that might answer the question about taking a solo. We'll do this on other chord changes and other songs as well. How much do we get that? Also, I want to relate to the fact that in my book, How to Play Today's Guitar Music Today, there are some samples of modes, meaning these different scales that will fit the different various chord changes. And on page 25, there's the beginning of a few chord changes and the different modes, so the scales that fit those chords, like C to A minor to D minor to G7. And on that page it tells you you'd use the Ionian for C major 7, and the Aeolian for A minor 7, and the Dorian for D minor, and the Mixolydian for G7. So that helps you to see your choice of scales that match the various chords. The idea is you will have various chord progressions, so you need to know the technique in the various in different keys. So you could say that also when I was taking that solo in C minor, that would come from C Aeolian. And so that would be the scale that would match those various chords. One scale can match more than one chord. And also, different scales can match different chords. It's not just always just one scale. It could be combinations of scales and combinations of different techniques that help you to bring your solo to the tension and release that you really want. So keep that in mind, that there are some samples and examples in my book called How to Play Today's Guitar Music Today. So if you don't have one, get in touch with me and we can order one for you. And the samples are on page 25 through 26, 27, or 28.
You want to just do it?